more interaction through networks that bring together academics, and policymakers. Secondly, I did say on related issue that academics themselves have to do their bit, that you have to make yourself wanted. And you can't make yourself wanted if you are not coming out clearly, in writings, engaging with politicians, on television, on radio, in newspapers, basically summarizing important issues that relate to what countries consider important. So apart from that interaction, it's also important for academics to realize that nobody will wait for them to tell them what they have that can benefit governments. It's up to them to see which is the best way, given that you are a resource, which is the best way for you to be able to impact on policy. The second one by our Ghanaian colleague on the case study on Kenya, the case study on harmonization of secondary school fees. He did ask whether or not there was any quantitative data. This study used a combination of methods, quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative in that we had focus group discussions with teachers, with parents, with the private sector people, and with different kinds of stakeholders that are involved in secondary education in Kenya. But we also collected quantitative data related to what is the cost of food, what is the cost of uniform, what is the cost of books. If you have to do classrooms and laboratories, what is the cost of that? So there was quantitative data mainly related to cost, because the idea was to ask, can we reduce the cost? So yes, that data was collected, and it's on the basis of that the recommendations were made on what levels, fees levels would recommend for the different categories of schools. Samsung?
Thank you, Dr. Kalemi. And just to mention to colleagues on the floor, should you have any follow-up questions, feel free to chime in for those questions. Just for the interest of time, I will just maneuver through the questions and read them through you and take 3 or 2 at a time, depending on the length of the question. So the next question is about regarding really the difference between countries. So the comparison. So this question was from Abdi, and the question was, my question is, how can we compare developed countries versus those living in changes in Africa? And then the follow-up, there was another second question, which is largely seems like a comment more or less, but thank you for the educative presentation. Apart from collaboration between policymakers and universities and researchers, I think collaboration with grassroots stakeholders is key to their challenges in the area of research. So that's really more a comment. And really the second question here from Mohammed Hassan Mukhtar, in the classification, there is a kind of motivating the school community. So what is the other manner to use? So I think let's start with those 2 questions, and then we have two more questions.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Samsam. About comparing developing countries and Africa, obviously we are worlds apart. Firstly, because this is a project on how we can use research to impact on policy, we don't have that much money, or rather our governments don't vote that much money for research, leave alone research for education. Even the universities are suffering. So in brief, let me say there's a lot more research going on that has a potential to impact on policy. Secondly, there's much more interaction between universities and researchers in universities and people in government. As you realize, if you go to the US, for example, some of the very senior people in government have been, taken out of universities, and after they even leave politics, go to teaching in senior universities in the US. So there's a little bit more interaction. So first, there's more money. Secondly, there's more interaction. Thirdly, I think there's less politicization of education decision-making. There's politics everywhere. Of course, Congress in the US will make decisions about what has to be done immediately. But there's a little bit more effort, I would say, in my view, to have researchers to base what happens in countries based on actual research work, especially in the area of university teaching. Universities are guided in terms of manpower surveys. Government will identify the needs for which universities will be called upon to to respond. And on the basis of those surveys, some of those surveys influence investments in specific departments on disciplines of standing. So the main difference is really in terms of resources that are available, in terms of a culture of accepting research more, in terms of there being a little bit more interaction between academics and people in government. And then finally, in terms of having education decision making more professional than we have it here. Now, on the grassroots stakeholders comment, it's extremely important. A lot of policies fail because we do not get down to the people down there to get them to explain to them. We've been doing a project in Malawi on introducing free secondary education. So after doing the research, the next step was to go to every district and meet with stakeholders, explain to them what was done, how it was done, and why it was important, and the findings that came out of that, so that they own the process. So grassroots, they're the principal consumers. We have got to go to them. But often as academics, we are happy to write in academic journals, which are rarely available to our people. A second way of doing that is to simplify what we do and share that in local newspapers, in newsletters, on radio, on television, so that you can reach as many people as possible, so that it's not just knowledge for its own sake for a few elite academics. The final one on motivation. I think the point here is that, when you classify schools, there's a danger in thinking that those who go to the top national schools go there purely out of merit. And I keep on saying, we need to be careful we don't confuse merit with privilege. In the case of many African countries, those who go to the top schools, secondary and universities and the best disciplines in medicine and so on, are people who have gone through private school education. A lot of those who have been advantaged from very early in life. So your parents are okay, they buy expensive private primary school education, sometimes secondary education. They can get you to university to do the course you want, because even if you don't go through a government program, they can buy, they can buy a place in for medicine, for Bachelor of Commerce, for law. And therefore, so then you classify schools. Now that's one problem. The second problem is that once you classify, you make education more expensive, because the competition is for those elite schools. And as long as there's competition, the principals of schools will increase the amounts that they're asking for. And even if it's not official, they will find a way of asking parents to pay, because parents are craving those kinds of places. So the problem with that dichotomy of top schools, day schools and so on, is that you create another challenge in terms of cost, but also you have an artificial differentiation that privileges a few and discriminates against the majority. So we need to find another system. The system I've always proposed is that if we are going to judge performance of students, we should not do it on the basis of the grade you got when the grade you are getting on exit. We should ask, when you came in, what was your grade? And which school, which principal has added more value? Who has moved it from a C to a B to an A minus? But not the one who got A's, straight A's in a national school, and will still produce materials that will get A's. That there has not been much there in terms of impact. And this is the best way, in my view, to begin to look at that. And then secondly, to progressively move towards having day schools. The majority of the schools in Europe and America are day schools. When you do that, then you are leveling the playing field. Of course, there are issues about distance and so on, but I think it is important to go that route, as long as you ensure the day schools have all the facilities that are required to make a kid and a parent want to take their children there, that they can actually compete. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kalemi, and I think you really answered that question well. So moving on, the following question from Rugar was more or less a comment, so I think we can move from this question just largely because we did have this large discussion about this gap between research academics and policy stakeholders. So colleagues, I will move away from this question as it's mainly a comment and a commentary. However, we do have our own question just to start for the next session as we get ready. And so the next question really is coming from the team. What are the barriers to really translate research into policy? Dr. Kalemi. as we move into the next session hosted by Yvonne?
Well, the main barriers, I think we can do a recap, but we discussed them in the last meeting. The main barriers relate to funding, relate to the politicization of education decision making, relate to a culture, policymakers and people in government not very well versed with the culture of research. Those issues we discussed, and I think the PowerPoint. Have we lost you? You can hear? Hello?
I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So essentially, those have got to do with the institutions themselves where research is conducted. That we do not share enough of that. It's got to do with the consumer, that is the government or the school principal or the teacher or the regional education officer who is not willing or prepared or has no data to use. Then there's a problem of the resources that are available. Few government ministries have departments of research, and even when they have them, they are not that well, they are not that well equipped with both the facilities and the people to do the job. So it's multifaceted. And then of course there are the contextual factors to do with the fact that institutions, the Ministry of Education operates within a subsystem, and that is the wider society, which is very complex, and where the demands are necessarily not always in agreement with even what the parent or the teacher or the people themselves would like to see. But I would encourage our participants to just refer to our first PowerPoint, because it gives that information in detail, if it was shared out yesterday, Samsung.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think this leads really well into the next session, which will be focusing on exploring the approaches to strengthen the role of evidence in policy. So I think I will allow Yvonne to take over. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zamzam, for taking us through the session. I'm sure at least now we have some answers to some of those questions. It's usually very bad if you have questions that are not answered. So, and thank you so much, Clemi, for taking us through that. So the next session, we're going to look at how, and this is going to be an open discussion. So we're not really expecting Dr. to be answering every question, but we want to look at how best, and we did give this as a takeaway, the last session, how best can we strengthen the role of evidence in policymaking? So that is what we are discussing today. How best can we strengthen, because we are here as researchers, we are here as policymakers, we are here as civil society representatives, advocacy groups. So how best can we strengthen the role of data or evidence in policymaking? Anyone would like to share? I think this was something that we gave as a takeaway.
Or if they can even share in writing and someone can read. But I think this is a good opportunity for us to just brainstorm. It's a plenary of some kind. And, I think especially based on country or your organization's experience.
And maybe I can start off by reading something that was shared last session.
Yes, please.
So we had Rugare Samati, and the contribution towards this discussion was, she agrees that there is need to bridge the gap between research, academics, all education stakeholders and policymakers in terms of research findings. And suggestion is that there is need to closely work with teacher trade unions and make the use of their ability to approach or to confront policymakers as pressure groups. So Rugare's suggestion is to make use of teacher trade unions as pressure groups to push the government to confront the government to use evidence in making policies. And then we also had a contribution from Otujo Omolara. If I pronounce your name wrongly, please forgive me. And from Otujo, he says that, thank you for the effective presentation. Apart from collaboration between policymakers, universities, and researchers, I think collaboration with the grassroots stakeholders is key to know their challenges and areas of research required. So those are two very important contributions. One, Otujo is talking about collaborating with the grassroots to understand the need and in areas that require research, so as to talk to the policymakers after that. And then we have Samati, who is saying we need to make use of teacher trade unions to work as pressure groups to press the government to work on using research to make policies.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I can give a go as some people, others, or unless there's someone else who wants to comment. Gertrude, I think wants to, or yes. Gertrude Namo.
Oh, okay, Gertrude can go, then Mamusa. Mamusa, you're next.
Otherwise, I can comment as we wait for a few people to respond. Yvonne, is that all right?
Hello. I thought Gertrude is getting to it.
Okay, Mamusa, you're already on. You can go ahead, please.
Oh, okay. My suggestion would be, except for the collaboration that we suggested last week, it could also be wise if the universities could have maybe a researchers club, whereby they also, in terms of enhancing that collaboration, they could come to the ministry, say maybe quarterly or maybe once a year, just to share their researches with the ministry, so that the ministry knows how far education is going with the available researches that are being made in that level. And I was also thinking the funding also could actually help, that could actually motivate the researchers to research more, and also to have such a small, just a small percentage of incentive to encourage them to research more in actually trying to find real solutions for our country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mamosa. We also had, hello.
Hello, Yvonne. Hello.
Yes, Lola, please go ahead.
Yes,
go next. Thank you.
Yes, I'm just commenting on the need for external pressure on the government, because I've seen that if you are within the government and you try to put pressure on what is not what you see should be beneficial, you find yourself alone at times. So if we have like the trade unions together with the NGOs and other organizations within the nation who would put to task the governments, and I think the African Union could also put our governments to task and ask them to bring out what has been achieved through whatever decisions they've made from the evidence we've got. Because I've seen there's been so much research and there've been so many NGOs and so many cooperating partners coming in, but very little is shared with us as citizens to see how best that is working for our nation. So I agree with the external pressure, and adding on to that, NGOs could do a lot.
Thank you so much, Lola, for your contribution. Indeed, we do need that pressure to get to the government for them to react. Could we hear from Gertrude? Gertrude, I've seen your hand severally, and then Jacqueline after that. Gertrude? Okay, Jacqueline, kindly, please go ahead.
Thank you, Yvonne. I think from the discussion, we seem to all be agreeing that there's a lot of research that is being done across different countries. I think maybe one of the things that we need to push for is that then governments need to probably organize to have a repository where all this research can actually be probably uploaded. We see a lot of time research is reactive. When an issue arises, then you find that is when government goes into wanting to carry out research, yet we are aware that there's a lot of research being carried out across the board from universities, from different institutions. So probably an important thing that needs to be put in place is as a repository that is accessible. I see, for instance, from our institute, I'm from Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, we have had to subscribe to different entities that do a lot of research so that from our library point, we are able to access a lot of research. Maybe this is something that other institutions may be able to look at, because not everybody will be able to come and present to you as an individual or as a government what they have done in research. But if there is somewhere where they can be, the information can be centralized, then it can be utilized easily, both by government and by any other person that may want to access that information. Thank you.
Thank you so
much. Back to you, Yvonne.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for your contribution. And yes, like you rightly said, there's a lot of research, but then usability is the issue. How do we get the government to use it? So I can see contribution from Dr. Marina Gyoko. Dr. Marina, would you like to say it here, or do I read it?
I can say it here.
Okay, please go ahead.
I think the idea is if we appreciate the power of evidence, then it will mean that whatever we do is informed. Whatever decision is made is informed from an evidence point of view. And that is where research plays a key role, because things are done from an informed point of view. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gyoko. We had a hand from Gertrude. Gertrude, able to connect now? Gertrude? Okay. Any other person would like to contribute to this discussion?
Hello. Hello.
Yes. Yes, please go ahead. We can hear you. Hello, we can hear you. Please introduce yourself. I can see you as Gabriel.
Yeah, Yvonne, this is Gertrude.
Yes, Gertrude, please go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I had not put up my hand. I don't know whether it is up because I'm traveling using my phone. But adding on what Jacqueline has said, I support what Jacqueline said. In most of our countries, African countries, policies and decisions are made not based on research. That's why we find policies which cannot be implemented because no research is done, but policies are passed. So we need to do something, maybe to call upon our governments to always use the academia to carry out research and always use the findings from the academia side of view. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gertrude. So I hope I'm not locking anyone else out. Any other member with a contribution?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm sorry today I was too late. I have been in with another meeting somewhere.
That's okay.
But in Mboya, I don't want to comment anything, but I want to tell you that when we finish this topic, you need to present. You need to present the presentation. You need to send us your presentation to us. In our country, normally we usually send to other people who are concerned more.
Okay, I didn't get your last point. You're breaking. We need to send you the presentation.
We ask you if you could send those last week presentation and this presentation for today, because we want to work on it.
Okay, thank you so much. I think the last week's presentation was sent today. Our apologies, there was a long holiday in between, but they were sent today. We will also send you this week's presentation as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Abdi, please go ahead and contribute. Abdi Mohamud. Please unmute yourself, Abdi. Abdi, you are muted.
I'm sorry, I got lost a little bit.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I have one comment about the importance of research in policy making. Hello?
Yes, Abdi, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Policymakers and practitioners use research various ways, including instrumental, conceptual, political, imposed, and process used to increase knowledge. So I can say researchers and policymakers every time as an educationist or when we are talking about the institutions, it's a very important.
Abdi, can you still hear us?
No, he finished. He's done. He said thank you.
Done. Okay, thank you. So I think we need to proceed, and please continue giving your contribution on the chat box. Please let us know how best can we strengthen the role of evidence in policymaking. It is very important. How do we strengthen it? The evidence is there, as we have all said, but then how do we strengthen the role of evidence? How do we ensure that it is used as it should be? Thank you very much. So at this point, allow me to welcome Dr. Kilemi for our next session. Kilemi, thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Here we go. Yeah, thank you, Gabriel. I think the topic is, like you said, that I hope I don't have problems with the internet again as I'm going through, but it's about the process of converting research findings into policy. Next. So what we are saying is it's okay to do research, but how do you, if you have it, how do you convert that into policy? So to begin with, it's extremely important to be sure that what you're getting is good enough for, to support policy in terms of, are the research findings to be used to help formulate policy? Are they of high quality? Are they relevant to the problem at hand? Are they accurate and dependable? Because if they're not, you could get into a lot of problems by doing the wrong things. Secondly, it's important to certify that what is being proposed is feasible from the points of view of coverage, because sometimes we try to buy too much in terms of time. If it's a policy on secondary school education, for example, how much time do we have to implement it before schools are open, and cost, and whether there is money to do the work that is required in terms of implementing that policy. Thirdly, it's important to be certain that research tools that are used were sensitive to changes in the research environments and were culturally sensitive, because you could do the wrong things by not taking into account the various conditions, especially cultural and environmental, in the places that you have been conducting your research. Fifth, it's good to be persuaded that the research findings are realistic and feasible from an implementation perspective. Whether or not it's about money in terms of time and coverage, the overall question is what we are proposing feasible? Is it doable or is it too ambitious? And then finally, it's important to identify policy issues to be addressed and to set the agenda for action by identifying key areas of policy which may benefit or suffer if available research evidence is used to formulate policy. In other words, is the research that we come up with, does it contradict previous policy, or does it support policy which is already in place, or does it help in terms of modifying implementation of our existing policy? Next, Gabriel. Yeah, and continued. And issues again to consider. It's important to first clearly define the policy challenge or problem that needs attention. If you're not clear about that, it's going to be very difficult for you to come up with a policy that you can implement, because clarity is the beginning of everything in terms of process and outcome. Then you need to recognize processes, environments, and institutional arrangements that can support consensus building and demystify research knowledge for policy formulation. Yeah, first of all, you need to reach consensus on all the key stakeholders, because they'll be part of implementation. But it's also important, talking about the gap between academics and policymakers, to demystify research, because this demystification is making it simple to understand, is not threatening people that are not in research to accept, because the moment they appreciate and understand, then you have the right missionaries and ambassadors to support the idea. Then you need to remove barriers to the use of research for policy making. The barriers that we spoke about, the barriers that we identified at the beginning of this session, but more importantly, the many barriers that we discussed in the last session on Wednesday, and which will be available in the PowerPoint that will be shared. Explore the best ways to incorporate research findings into policy formulation. It's one thing to want to incorporate, but depending on circumstances and country and resources and the contextual environment, you will need to identify the best ways to use that research, because it's not one suit fits all. It will depend on the country in which you are operating from, and the political and other dynamics that affect both the defining, the formulation, and the implementation of policy. Then highlight areas of research that are insufficiently understood in terms of policy research. There are areas that might be not as well understood. You begin with those before you conclude your plan of action. Next. Yeah, policy formulation. Once you are happy with the data and you have put in place the relevant structures and you're in agreement with stakeholders about where to proceed, then you are ready to start formulating your policy based on the research evidence that you've got. And to start with, you need to start to design the policy by exploring the various policy options within the relevant government ministry or ministries or department, after key officials decide which reforms of policy choices are feasible and which are not. So you design based after that consensus building with the key people. And after you have agreed, it's okay, we have this many ideas, which of them are feasible? Then secondly, have the different policymakers and implementers reach a consensus on the best possible short-term and long-term actions, given the available resources, the political interests that we were talking about, manifestos, and other contextual factors. So you need to agree. Everything will not be done immediately. And there are things that we'll see the results in 5 years, but there are those that have to be done now. Because if it's classrooms, we need to build right away. If it's about basic education for all, we have to get children in school. If it's about 100% transition, we have to make sure everybody who graduates from primary to secondary, primary goes to secondary school. So there are those that are short-term that must be done, either because of political expediency or because it is necessary in terms of improving access and equity. But there are those also that we have to look into the long term. Next. Again, with regard to formulating policy, once consensus has been arrived by government officials, then you need
Hello, we seem to have a bit of a problem with Dr. Kilemi's connection. Can anyone else hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I can hear you, Yvonne.
Yeah, you.
Okay,
I think
let's
it's from
see.
the colleagues.
Yeah, I think there's a problem with his connection. Let me see if we can join again. Thank you. A minute is joining. Thank you for your patience. Sorry for that. Dr. Clem is still trying to join. I think there's a problem with the connection. May I also ask that unless we are speaking, we put off our videos so that we can conserve the bandwidth. Thank you.
Are you seeing that?
Hello, Dr.
I am back.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so sorry, I can apologize. I'm in a hotel. I'm staying at the hotel in some place in Kenya. But I thought that would be no problem, but I really apologize. But now on building consensus, senior government officials need to make decisions now best to proceed, given that solutions will not be one solution for all. Then after making the decision is made on which policies to implement, the government then pushes for adoption through what we said earlier on, stakeholder engagements. That should take place in parliament, with civil society, the private sector, and everybody else, including the teachers' unions that we are talking about, to enact relevant legislation and preparation of related bills, session of papers and regulations, because you can't implement until it has become legal. And finally, an implementation budget must be prepared, stipulating the cost of implementing the said reform, the sources of the required funds, and how those funds will be managed. Sorry, next. Gabriel. Thank you. Now, in terms of implementing policies, the first stage is to have a precise and feasible design. And what factors do you have to look at as you are designing, you are doing a policy design? First, identify the problem the policy aims to address. Then, please check if you can learn from experience elsewhere instead of reinventing the wheel. Then check for specific goals and targets. You know, for example, how many people you want to target, how many pupils you want to target, how many institutions, and so on. Then build consensus among key players. Then, you know, check on the logic of the assumptions made. Are they logical? Do they make sense? Or is it something that you can do, you know, progressively? And then experience with check those who have experience with implementing similar policies so that you can learn from that. And then check on the feasibility in terms of available human and physical resources. Now here, as you check on these factors, there are certain actions that you need to take, strategic actions. The first one is try to the extent possible to rely on knowledge that is relevant to the policy and to the local setting. Then produce a realistic number of simple, clear, and measurable objectives. Set up a monitoring and evaluation system that will guide you in terms of knowing whether you are getting where you wanted to get, and if not, why not. Be clear on the implementation methodology. Then have a realistic timeline. Mobilize the needed resources because you can't start with the resources. Next, Gabriel. Next.
Dr. Let me run the stakeholder involvement slide. Are you able to see it?
Yeah. So now we exactly, and we did the feasible design. So it's the next slide. I can't see the next slide, Gabriel. The one I can see is the previous one on precise and feasible design. So the one after.
I see. On my screen, it shows stakeholder involvement. Let me see. Let me maybe try to stop my screen share and share it again. How about now, Dr. Kalemi?
It's not out yet, but I guess it's on the way. I hope it's nothing coming up. I don't know if the other participants can see. Nothing yet.
Nothing else.
I can see Gabriel, but it's the previous slide. The stakeholder involvement.
Yes,
Yeah,
we have the
mine.
stakeholder involvement.
Yes, we can see stakeholder involvement.
So what I can do,
Same
I can
here,
also.
Yeah, I can see stakeholder involvement.
Gabriel, it will be the next slide.
I don't know why I can't see. I saw up to feasible design.
Maybe you can try connecting again, Doc.
No, I am connected, but I can do that again. Let me just see, because I could. Yeah, let me see. I'm connected. I'm connected to the internet actually.
Yes, I mean maybe you can try and leave and come back again because we can all see it.
Yeah, that's what I've done. It's maybe now I am now reconnected. Let's see. No problem. What I can do, if you can hear me.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you can hear.
What I'll do,
yeah.
I just read from my own notes. So we've done the precise and feasible design. So the next one is stakeholder involvement. And the key factors here is identify the key groups affected by the policy, Be sure that relevant partners can work together, identify and prepare the key policy implementers, prioritize knowledge and experience, grow teams by building capacity of the less experienced for continuity, so that you don't depend only on those who have the experience, and then bring aboard potential saboteurs. There are those who will be against the policy. There will be opponents. Find a way of bringing them in, because you don't want anybody opposing, especially if they are key people in government or people in government. Then you need to put in place a mechanism for accountability. In terms of actions that you have to ensure, strategic actions that you have to ensure relate to this stakeholder involvement, is please ensure that you learn from key stakeholders from the design stage to implementation, that they are part of it, not just at the beginning, but they are part of the process and they are part of the conclusion. Then you share tasks and responsibilities. Ensure that retention of key actors. There's a lot of disconnect in government, in that stability of especially civil servants, sometimes especially key ones, is not that long, because they are sought after by donors. After they're worked out with donors, they look for other opportunities. So this is a problem, and also in terms of change of government. But it is extremely important to ensure that there is continuity from government to government, or from ends of department to the ends of departments, by retaining the key actors. Then involve local actors in accountability mechanisms. Use simple communication strategies amongst key stakeholders. Not all of them understand the academic jargon or complicated reports done by the World Bank and UNESCO. Please simplify that to be able to take them along. The next one is on the right environment, to ensure that you form on the right environment. And the key factors here to ensure that you have the appropriate environment is ensure that you have set the right setting. And ensure that what is proposed coincides with the existing policy, because if it contradicts, it's going to be very difficult. Contextualize factors that could derail implementation. Then ensure that you identify factors likely to support implementation and leverage on those. Try to anticipate potential obstacles and plan for them. Identify conflicts with existing policies, if at all, because if there are conflicts, it's going to be very difficult. Now, in terms of strategic actions related to the right and ensuring that you have the right environment, is you need to leverage the existing policy environment. You need to ensure that new institutions gel with existing ones, the new institutions that have been created to support the policy. You need to consider and prepare different outcome possibilities, because sometimes what you expect is not what might come out. And you learn that as you do the monitoring and evaluation. And then please, because resources are limited, do not duplicate efforts to the extent possible. The final slide is on policy evaluation, or the final section of this presentation, and succession. And here we're saying it's one thing to have a policy going on, but you need to ensure that all interested parties, both within and without the government, design a monitoring and evaluation instrument to evaluate the extent to which the policy is achieving the intended goals, and if not, why. This should lead to improvements of the policy considering the impact of the original policy. Secondly, policy evaluation can be conducted through collection of quantitative data on enrollments, on dropouts, on progression, and through sample surveys and so on, and qualitative data, case studies, observations, analysis of content, etc. Again, on evaluation exercises should be used to adjust the implementation process based on the data and feedback collected. And finally, evaluation will also be useful in helping make decisions on whether or not the policy is to remain unchanged, whether it needs to be modified or done away with altogether. I think that's it. And I'm really sorry about the interruption, but that's it by way of this presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Kalemi. Very engaging presentation here. So I'm going to open up the floor, colleagues, for your questions. As we open up the floor, I think you really talked about this importance between relationship building and the needs assessment, which really leads to one question from Clifford from Kenya. So Clifford, if you can unmute yourself and please say your question as I wait for colleagues please raise your hand or put your questions in the chat box. Clifford, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Zamzam and Dr. Kilemi. That was a wonderful presentation. And as you've said, involving stakeholders from the beginning is a very important part of any research. But now here comes a case where you have a challenge involving all the stakeholders that you really need flow from one level to another. What are some of the things that you'd advise people to do, researchers to do, so that they have it easy? And number two, you've talked about the change in office bearers. It's really a problem. Once you've created a relationship and your research is going on, then office bearers change. It's beyond your control. Maybe it's a government policy switching offices or transferring the civil servants. What do you advise at that level where you've created relationships and everything is going on well, then all of a sudden you have to like start all over again, educating or sharing what you're doing with the new office bearers? This drags the process back a bit. So I would love to hear your thought on the two issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Samsam, do you want me to take that? Or do you want us to take a few more questions?
I'm not seeing any questions coming in. Colleagues, please add your questions or raise your hand. Dr. Kilemi, I think you can take this question, and then as we wait for more colleagues to add questions. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Clifford Gar from Kenya. It is true. It's unrealistic to expect all stakeholders to be involved. And also sometimes you have to ask questions about the extent of involvement. Do you have the resources and the time to go all over, especially when you have to do something quickly? So the important thing is to, ask yourself what is feasible in terms of how many groups you can reach at and whether or not those groups are representative of the total picture you like to see, just like you do in research. So first of all, we have to be, realistic in terms of how many people we can reach. Secondly, let's also appreciate that a lot of our people, even when there is, they talk about public participation in parliament, very few people show up to participate. So again, we should not be derailed by that because of that expectation. And surprisingly, in some countries, I've had experience where you ask stakeholders to come to meetings and they benefit from those meetings, but because there is this culture of donors, giving out handouts, that they will not go to a meeting unless they are paid. So these are interesting realities. And, so it's a lot of education that is required. It's a lot of time. And from the academic perspective, we need to be able to not to look like we know it all, because sometimes, the people we are working with at the grassroots and who are the majority are lucky if they have had basic education. So you need not to, intimidate them with your PhD or your master's degree by simply, proving through doing and discussions with them that you can be one of them. Again, going back to the issue we spoke about language and about what is your medium of presenting your findings and so on. And then find a way of talking to government more. Someone spoke about a club of researchers, one of the participants today, that can try to pressurize government about trade unions, and so on and so on. So more talking, more interaction, demystifying research, being able to relate with the stakeholders, ensuring that you find a way of interesting them in what you're doing, and so on. Now, the issue of continuity is a very tricky one, Clifford. It's a very interesting one. Because in Africa, we have permanent secretaries. I don't know why they call them permanent secretaries, because they're never permanent. I think the reason the point about a permanent secretary is one who continues. When the politicians come, when there is a new government, that person should be able to continue. Unfortunately, that's not the case in a lot of our countries. But the least we can do is lobby and increase understanding. Again, these are questions of discussions to government to indicate or to make it very clear that if you want a policy to succeed, you cannot change people continuously. And if the key researchers or policymakers are being attracted because of greener pastures, pay them better so they stay, and promote them within the department. And these are issues, again, about discussion. This is a new terrain. And the good thing with this is that we have these opportunities. Maybe, like someone said, brings external stakeholders to push the agenda. Maybe it's time because the AAU is part of this program. Maybe go to AAU and make use of research for policy a key issue, that governments must discuss, and that the AAU must take forward as an important agenda in terms of not just forcing or convincing government to use more research, but also to put more research, money for research and education. I think that's for that, for the two questions. This is what I would say, Clifford.
Great, thank you, Dr. Kilemi. We've got a question coming. We've got a question coming in from Lola from Zambia. Lola, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, hello, thank you, Zamzam, and thank you, Doctor. I've seen that in Africa, if we see that our neighboring countries are doing well, why not learn from our neighboring country than get something so foreign? But I don't know how best we can make ourselves appreciate what we have, because I'm sure we have so many people who are educated in Africa who can actually encourage a lot of change in our nations. But whenever we see something coming from ourselves, we have this tendency of looking down upon what we can do, unless it comes from the external because there's money and all that. How best can we do that so that we begin with what we can do?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Lola. There's been a lot of talk about we Africans needing to decolonize our minds, not to think that everything Western is what we need. Yet we have potentially very useful homegrown solutions. And we have countries that have done better than us in certain respects. For example, if you go to Rwanda, there are many things that they have done well. If you go Uganda, in the area of teacher education reform, they have done quite a bit. If you go to Lesotho, Lola, are you from Lesotho? Sorry. There's in other ones in brief. Yeah, Zambia. Yes, we can learn from our countries. So when we talk about, therefore, learning from our countries, we need to begin with ourselves, but especially people in positions of authority, to appreciate that we can learn more from our neighbors because we have similar experiences and similar conditions than picking ideas from Europe and America where we're wound apart. For example, we can never expect to open up universities in Kenya or any other country and have them at the same quality as they will have in the UK or Japan or someplace, because we don't have those resources. So therefore, what is the best compromise given the resources that we've got, and given the fact that we also need to reach out to more numbers in higher education, and also appreciating that higher education, just like it is the basic education for Europe and America, it's now the basic education for Africa. What is realistic to do? Are there countries that have done something that we can copy? Is it possible to go to Nigeria because they democratized university education before many of the countries, to learn that from that experience? Or Kenya has opened up universities a great deal. So yes, I mean, I agree completely. But beyond that, I've been a great advocate of saying that, there are countries in Asia, the Asian tigers. They have come, they copied what happened. I was in South Korea and I met the founding father. I made a point of saying it because, he had accomplished so much. And he told me all they did is it was Malaysia. He said all they did was go to see what South Korea had done, and they copied that. And he was saying, there are many countries in Africa that can learn from each other, just like you said. So if we are not learning from our countries, and which we should, the next step, even before we jump to the West, is to ask countries that were the same level of development as Zambia, as Kenya, as Ghana in the 70s. That is, the Asian tigers, Malaysia, Singapore, South Korea. How did they do it? Korea just copied Japan. Malaysia copied South Korea. So yes, we need to do that, but we need to begin to decolonize the mind. We need to be less dependent. We can't go asking for money all the time and accept that the donors will not give us examples from their own countries. We can't go asking for money from organizations, donors all the time, and expect that a lot of the consultants will not come from those countries. So it's a debate that has to be confronted at the leadership level. And for me, my challenge to academics always is, even as you are discussing politics about alignments, about who is coming to power, to what extent do teacher unions, to university academics, to researchers decide will support this political party because this political party will support our agenda in government? Because that's where all the decisions are made. So, and this is where it has to begin. So unless you're involved in politics in terms of who gets elected, or playing a role in terms of ensuring that you have a significant group that represents your interests, a lot of these things we're talking about will remain theoretical, written about in academic journals and in books. And academics will complain from the lecture theaters how terrible things are. Yet there is not much they have done themselves to be part of that solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kalemi. Thank you, Lola. I think that was a really great question, and it really segues into the next question, which is more or less really focusing on this needs assessment that we need. So I'm just going to open the floor to Olive in regards to forming this particular niche needs assessment within the countries and looking within ourselves within those specific countries. So Olive, could you unmute yourself if you'd like? Olive, the floor is yours. In that case, then I will just go ahead and read out the question. I don't hear from Olive.
Hello?
Yes.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself.
Okay, no problem. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. for a good presentation and very key points about the way we should be, we should integrate research into policy, but I think we should have more forums for educationists who are serving service to come into several forums to be able to discuss what is happening to our education at different points. You see, education in Kenya keeps changing, but I think we rarely come together to analyze as educationists, what is this that is happening in the country? And I think that's the same for other countries. And it's it, addressing some of the research that some people have done and found out about our different countries. I think these forums are very important. And I think I thank UNESCO for this one, that we are able to interact. And I think there should be more and more so that we interact, we disseminate what we know, we look at what is happening in our country and see whether it's in line with what the research findings are about. And I think that was just my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Olive Bodia. That's extremely important because I think the biggest problem we have is that we disengage. We don't get involved. Even when we have information to offer, we don't participate. Of course, you can say we are not invited. Academics, sorry, I should take, I used to be an academic, so I sometimes forget I'm not there. But academics should, even if they're not invited, they need to find a way of pressurizing in their forums. And starting inviting even policymakers to, before, there's time that politicians would go to universities and give lectures, ministers of education, the policymakers, not interaction, but the most important is for the stakeholder, the education community of Bodhi and company, to appreciate that, you see, unless we come together, we will not be able to influence what happens. And we can be an extremely important pressure group. There are civil society organizations that are influencing, asking questions about what's happening in basic education. But I have not found a community of educators who will go challenge and raise points and go, and come up with, debate issues that have got to do with policy, especially where they have an opportunity to contribute. So it's not, you see, we complain too much. We complain too much. I always challenge parents. They complain that school fees are going up, that the principal has decided to introduce this levy and they didn't accept. It makes fees expensive. The problem though is that a lot of parents, even when they're going to come to parents meetings, do not raise their voices. They do not say what they have in mind for fear of being victimized or their children will be victimized. And it is the same. You know, I think that a lot of people live in fear of expressing themselves or are hesitant, not knowing what the outcome will be. But the real problem is I don't think academics have come up, and the education community in general has come up with pressure groups that ask important questions, apart from those that are supported by civil society. So we need to confront the situation. We need to, academics have to be part of it, and they can only be part of it by forcing or persuading, convincing the powers that be to listen to them more often.
Thank you, Dr. Kalemi. Thank you, Olive, as well. I think that was really a great discussion in terms of really that mutual capacity strengthening, right, between both researchers and policymakers to gain valuable knowledge and insight. So I'm just going to take one more question, which would be, I do see the raised hand from Mrs. Lola, Miss Laula, please, or raise your hand. Please unmute yourself and say your question. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for that wonderful presentation. I am Oluwaseun Lawal from FPCD Nigeria. Well, just to buttress on what the earlier speaker said about research. For instance, in Nigeria here, we carry out different researches, but I felt it always ended in the library. Like in my PhD, I carried the research on policy implementation on educational service delivery for children with special needs. And I look at the southwestern Nigeria. I believe with the result and the outcome of the research, the research should be able to allow government to know the level of implementation of national policy on special needs education in Nigeria. Fine, like for instance now, special needs education has always been identified, recognized from a section of national policy on education. But looking at the anomalies in special needs education, that is why government established national policy on special needs education in 2015. I believe from 2015 to 2021, this needs to be corrected as in service delivery for these children. We're carrying out a research on such, and I found out that it's still same thing, that there is no education for all. But all this research we're talking about, we end in the library. Look at the situation we are finding ourselves in this country with these lecturers in the university that are on strike. So I think we have a lot to do on basic education in Africa. Well, in Nigeria as an example, because that's the foundation of education. If these are not put in right places, how do we go about it? How do we go about it? If UNESCO can try to visit, I'm just saying they have people that can help them out to see what is really going on. People carry out research, fine, but what is the result? What is the effort of government? Even the lecturers or the researchers, we just keep quiet. We keep on writing, publishing papers, finding problems, but yet we are still finding the same problem in our educational system. So I just don't know, because it baffles me, it disturbs me a lot, it saddens my heart. Researchers in education carry out research very well, but where has it taken us to? Have they been to the archive to check what is going on and see how to put things right? No. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yes, it's yeah, I know it's hurting. I can understand why it's so frustrated, but you will find, you go to many government ministries or even university research institutions, you find there's a lot of material that could have been used. You find that there's a lot of duplication of what is happening. You know, people did research sometimes ago about absenteeism, about dropouts 10 years ago. 5 years down the line, somebody else is doing the same thing. So there's a lot of material that is gathering dust in shelves, you know, all over the place. It's as if production of knowledge is there for its own sake. Sometimes these documents are also produced because someone must spend money, you know, to do that. So for me, I've always said, even in terms of coordinating efforts and learning from what has been done, one support that researchers and government may need is to ask questions about what is it that has been, recommended by research 10 years ago, but that we have never used. Secondly, how can we get our own people to also, come out more strongly in terms of influencing that policy? And it's that community of researchers we are talking about. So there's a lot that we can use that is not being used. So the beginning point is that. But secondly, more importantly, Lawal, maybe that's why you shouldn't be so frustrated, because I think this conversation has already started in this group. And if we can do more and more, if we can do more and more of this, and if this program is going to be extended, these debates and this community, maybe this would be the beginning of making a real difference, and sometimes lifting some of the frustrations that we have had as researchers, where there's just knowledge for its own sake, where there are a lot of writings but not being implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kalami. Thank you, Lawal. I think we're going to finish the session here. I think both of you raised a very important point in terms of really establishing this rapid response mechanism around research and really the challenges that we are facing. Hopefully with this forum, we're seeing that change. And so I'm going to stop here and allow Yvonne to come in and take over. Thank you everyone for your session. It's been really great to have your engaging questions. I'm just going to quickly check and see if there are any questions coming in. I do see one question from Stella Knight. Stella, if you quickly want to unmute yourself, go ahead. I just saw your question coming in.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I joined in late. I was moderating another meeting. I did not ask a question. I only agreed with Doctor to say that there is quite a lot of research and evidence generated, and indeed the bigger issue is how to use that data, disseminate it, use it for advocacy, resource mobilization, budgeting, and all that is for me the bigger issue. Yes, we still need new forms of research due to the changing context, but there is a lot more of it. Sometimes it feels like we generate some of this evidence for the sake of generating evidence, but there needs to be better investment in disseminating, especially to the duty bearers, and then especially using it. Thank you. I'm Knight Stella from UNICEF Uganda.
Thank you, Stella, and thank you, colleagues. I do see some of your comments coming in, Jeddah, which I believe we are all in agreement, the concept of really strengthening and disseminating research, as Stella has said. So I will leave it here. Thank you all. Yvonne, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Zamzam. Thank you everyone for the questions and for your contributions. We do have another session that now we'd like to go into, and we're going to have this session in small groups. This is just an opportunity for us to discuss, and basically we'd like just you to think about available evidence and also the knowledge gaps in your specific countries. So we're going to put you into groups, and I'll welcome Gabriel just to give us some of the questions that we need to talk about and how we're going to be grouped. Welcome, Gabriel.
Okay. Yeah, so I can introduce this. The point here, participants, is to check the extent to which research has influenced policy and which policy. And we are basically answering four related questions, and very briefly because you don't have that much time. So the first issue you are addressing it, what do you consider the most significant policy that has been implemented by your government regarding expanding access of girls to basic education opportunities? There must be one important policy. This is a favorite for donors and governments. So what do you consider to be a most significant policy relating to expanding access for girls in basic education? Secondly, just quickly, how was this policy arrived at? Was it a product of research? Was it a product of politicians deciding we have to do this? Was it an issue that we imposed by donors? And very briefly, thirdly, in your view, has the implementation of that project been successful or not? If not, please say why. If successful, give one or two reasons. Give two reasons for the policy's implementation success or failure. And please, we would like you to go back, look at a policy in the last 10 years. Just in case, because there are a lot of issues on girls' education, but in the last 10 years, 2012 to 2022, you'll probably find an important, what you consider a very important policy in your country, and whether or not how it was arrived at, whether the implementation is successful, even if it's going, and two reasons only for the policy's implementation, success or failure. I think that's a brief for that.
Thanks so much, Jacqueline. So I will now commence the breakout rooms. We've tried the best to organize them loosely by region, so Eastern, Southern, and Western, to help with similarities that may occur during the responses to some of these questions. In some cases, it's not completely possible, so you might be in a region that is not the region that you come from, just due to numbers as well as lack of information as to which countries some of the participants are from. But with that said, I'm gonna create the breakout rooms, and then all of these questions will also be shared in all of the different breakout rooms, so we have access to all of them. All right, so at your convenience, please join the breakout room that you have been assigned to.
Hi, Gabriel.
Hi, Yvonne.
Oh, you did put me in the same room as Dr. Kileme. Could you assign me somewhere else?
Yes, I can do that.
Is it possible for you to peep into the rooms just to inform them that they need to have a rapporteur or someone who will be presenting whatever they discuss?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
I can do that. Okay, so I send you to room 2.
Yes, we're back. Gabriel?
Yes, I think we're all back.
Oh, great. We're all back. And, I think other groups have discussed the 4 questions. In our group, we requested that there be a note taker who would, in 3 minutes, summarize what we said. Do you want us to start with our group? Or how do you want it to go, Gabriel?
Sure. If we could start with your group, Dr. Clemmie, that would be great.
Okay, very well.
Okay, thank you very much. In our group, we have countries like Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria. So every country represented in the group has policy that supports girl child, basic education, various policy like Kenya, they have a policy on sanitary pad. Uganda has inclusive education. Nigeria has national policy on education, conditional cash transfer policy and such. And in every country that is being represented, the policy was as a result of research. So it was based on research evidence and things like that. Then talking about the success of the policy, Uganda can say that the policy is partially successful because it involves the first lady in the country, being the top official in the country. Nigeria said it has been very successful. Kenya mentioned that it is partially successful because some groups are still lacking behind in terms of buying or providing sensitive price for their girl child. So thank you.
Thank you very much, our group rapporteur. Anybody in the group would like to say something additional to what Oluwaseun Lawala said? Thank you. I think there's nothing. So you can proceed to the next group, Gabriel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Sorry to take you back. Additionally, they had support, school material support, which encourages them to go to school.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was very informative to hear about research experiences in Uganda, Nigeria, and Kenya. We can move on to the next group. That would be wonderful. Could I ask Maria's group to go next? Hello, Maria. If Maria isn't with us, then maybe I can ask someone else from another one of the groups to volunteer.
Maria is not unmuted herself.
I'll talk about our group. We had Lesotho, Kenya, and Zambia. And we looked at Lesotho has a free primary basic education. And this was as a result of signing a convention, and it's a policy. And then positive strides have been made. Girls were expected to be in school, and it came out as a result of a conference that was held. Then we also see that in Kenya, there is also free education, primary, secondary, and so on, which was also to encourage girls to be in school, and this improved enrollment. Then we also have a similar program for girls education, early unintended pregnancies for Lesotho. And then also for Zambia, there is something to do with girls education. And also we've seen that for Lesotho, this policy has not yet been implemented, but for Kenya and Zambia, it's been implemented. There are various challenges in each of the countries, but I've also seen that in Kenya, there's also a Basic Education Act where the girls are provided with sanitary towels, and it has been embraced well. Of course, there have been a few challenges here and there because of finances and also some skepticism, We also looked at the girls' education, where a girl gets pregnant and they are accepted in school. Like for Zambia, missionary schools usually are skeptical about that. In Kenya, we saw that it's only some of those missionary schools that are skeptical, but we saw that there's an increase in girls' education, and I think we'll end there so that we allow others to share and others can add more. Of course, we wrote a lot, but we'll end here. Basically, it's all those things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lola. I see Jacqueline's hand next, so I'll ask her to go next.
Thank you. In our group, we had Kenya and Ethiopia. I think there was Lesotho, though we didn't capture everything. But yeah, the Kenyan situation is as has been presented by Lola. Oh, sorry, Somalia, not Ethiopia. Sorry, Mohammed. So I just want to present at least the Somalia case that yes, they have a gender education policy, which may not be very comprehensive because of the challenge of allowing the girls to come back to school after they have dropped out of school because of early marriage. Basically, this is something that happens between the ages of 15 and 17. And while the children may have an intention of coming back to school, they have a challenge that maybe the school administration are not ready to take them back. And therefore, there is need for a review of that policy, which has not been done. So we felt that for both countries, there's some successes. As Lola indicated on the Kenya side, quite a number of girls have been able to go through their education. And I think additionally, other than the schools supporting these girls, we have had very many people of goodwill opening up centers, having centers, especially where there are cases of early marriage and the children are rescued, but also in cases where the children may not stay in their homes even as they access school. There are people who have opened up some safe havens for the girls to allow them to still learn even as they are in these centers. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jacqueline. And I think we have one more group. If Dada, Undesa, Makabelo, Roderick, sorry if I'm mispronouncing any of your names, if any of you would like to share the discussions that were had in your group, I give you the floor. If not, then maybe I invite Dr. Kilemi to wrap up the discussions for today before we move on to the survey and wrapping up today's session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, yeah, I would not have much to say, Gabriel, just to say that it's been quite an interesting learning experience. Surprisingly, even though we say a lot of policies have nothing to do with research, it's clear that research has impacted on all those policies. Maybe the question is the extent to which there was enough ownership by the local communities, or who sponsored the research projects and so on and so on. Were they donor-driven? Was it about political motivation and so on and so on? We also have found where there's an interjection, a good, where there's good cooperation between the politicians and those who are making the policy, as in the case of Uganda, it's easier to get something along. Because from my own experience, the best policies that get through are those that have, what would you call them? A visible personality at the top, being the ambassador of the project. And this is again the experience from Uganda. But essentially, I think it's been interesting, but also we have had how it has been difficult to implement these policies successfully in terms of because of the resources that are available, because the countries are large, or because some parents can't afford what is expected of them, as we've learned from Kenya. So I think it's interesting. And when we get to the next stop, where we'll be looking much more about what you would like to pick as a country as a priority for research to influence policy, we'll get into more details. But this has been quite an eye-opener. Thank you.
An eye-opener indeed. Thanks so much, Dr. Kalemi. I hope everyone has had the chance to see the link that Hundensa shared in the chat. It would be wonderful to hear your thoughts and comments about today's session, what you enjoyed, what you took away, and perhaps what can be improved for the next and final session on employing research and innovation for evidence-based policymaking. With that, I will perhaps invite Yvonne to share if she has any concluding remarks for today's meeting. All right, thank you, and over from my end.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. Thank you, Dr. Kalemi, and everyone else for participating. So for our next session, what we'd really like to hear from you, we'd like you to just look at the research gaps in your specific countries. It does not have to be on girls accessing education. We do have 6 thematic areas. It can be on data, it can be on teaching and learning or learning assessment, but we do need to understand so that we are in a position to provide help. It will be good to know what are the gaps in your specific country, and also it will be good to know how can we as the hub support you. Is it possible for us to link you with maybe organizations that can help you in implementing your policies? So kindly, that is our assignment for next session, and we're expecting each and every person from the different countries to at least give us something. What are the gaps that you're noticing in your own country, and how can we go about it, so that as the KICS hub, how can we assist you? It will be very important. I think it will be in vain if we just sit here and talk about research, and then we do not have a way forward. So it will be good to know what exactly do you expect from KICS? How can we assist? So thank you very much for coming, and we really hope that you can also take the survey. We'd like to know your insights. How was the session? Did you like it? Is there something else that you need us to concentrate on? We really need to know the way forward from you. As KICS, what we have done in the past 2 years is that we listen and then we act on what you require. So it is not about what Yvonne sits and Gabriel and Marianne and Desawit and everybody else and thinks about. It is about what is it that you need from us, and we prioritize that and we try to provide. So thank you so much for coming. And
can I
yes.
make a proposal, Yvonne?
Yes.
Just a proposal. I don't know, because you are the organizers of this and you had something concrete in terms of moving it forward. One theme that I find cuts across and that will incorporate a lot of the sub-themes that we speak about, whether it's technology or teachers and so on, is issue about access, expanding access to quality education, for all marginalized groups. Because this is a theme across. This is the biggest problem in Africa. So so that we don't open it up to so many different facets, if we can just focus on that, would be my proposal, because a lot of the sub-themes you have relate to that, because technology is about expanding access to quality education. With the teachers, it's because they have to teach to accommodate the numbers. So if we can narrow down, it might be easier to deal with, because it's not possible for us to address all these other themes. This is a suggestion.
Thank you, Dr. Kalemi. So what is the assignment exactly? It will be good to be clear. Sorry, some of us are slow learners.
Hello.
No.
Yes.
Please, can I add to what she just said? That with quality education, that should involve quality environment, quality teacher, and in all ramification, quality. So we should take that into consideration.
So what the proposal I was making—
curriculum must be quality curriculum that is that will give us quality education for all children.
Yeah. So can I come in now? Can I come in?
Yes.
The proposal I was making was, and I think she has emphasized my point, that if we talk about access to quality education, it incorporates most of the sub-themes that we have there. It's about girls,
Okay.
it's about the marginalized, it's about technology to expand access, it's
All
about
right.
teachers so that they can teach. So I want us
Yes.
to narrow down to the gaps that exist with regard to policies related to expanding access to quality basic education.
Okay.
This is a proposal, but I'm not saying that what you said earlier on.
I know
Yvonne,
that is good.
It's a good one, Dr. Kilemi. But let's always remember the key factor to quality education, which I see one as skills development. Key factor to skills development can start at a very young age of these children. With the situation we are having in different countries, especially in Africa, skills development through project-based learning approach. We need that when you're talking about quality education, sir, too.
Access to basic quality education, because it covers both access and quality. And all the sub-themes we have in the KICS program relate to that, as a matter of fact. And that way we narrow down. We don't ask them about technology and gaps in technology, gaps in girls education, and so on. We just take the main theme, and the main challenge in Africa is access to quality education.
Education. You're very right. Good one.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So the assignment is on the chat. So for our next session, we'll look at that. What are the gaps that exist with regard to access to quality education? So, and we really want to understand country by country. So we're not looking at it as abroad. We're looking at what are the gaps in Ethiopia? What are the gaps in Nigeria? What are the gaps in Lesotho? What are the gaps in Kenya? What are the gaps in Uganda? So thank you so much for coming, and have a blessed evening and a blessed day. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank all of you, but at the same time, apologize for the problems I had with the internet in rural Kenya. These are some of the challenges we face, even as we want to use technology to expand access to quality education. If we can resolve some of these problems, we'll reach out to many more. But thank you very much. It's been very engaging, and I look forward to the third.
The problem is everywhere. It's in Nigeria too, Doctor. God will help us.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Please make sure you take the survey. It is important to us. We need to know what you think and what you feel and what you need from the KICS Africa 19 Hub so that we can support you better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you and bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yvonne, did you want us to do a little bit of recap? Gabriel, Samsam, and Yvonne.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering whether Yvonne would like us to do a recap like we did last time. Gabriel, Samsam, and Yvonne.
Sure, I'm available. Gabriel, yeah, I don't see the issue. I'm not sure, is Yvonne here? Yeah, she can hear us.
That means it's
also available.
Yeah, if you don't see her. Oh, she's also available?
She's here. No, she's online. But overall, let me just start. I think it was, a very interesting session. Questions were coming in. So it was not a difficult session in the sense, like participants were really engaging with your presentation. And as we saw, the questions were coming in. And I think actually this one, we had a good balance of questions. So like we had enough time to reflect on what you were saying. So.
Yeah, because we did one presentation, but also because we took it from where I would like to say that I don't know how many participants we have in total, but let me just check. But I don't know whether we had as many as last time, but the ones that came they participated and there was a lot of interest. Even in the groups, we cut them short. They would have liked to go on and on and on. So I think this sets a pace for the next discussion, the workshop, or the gaps, and we can just concentrate on that. That's a big enough topic, because sometimes we are giving ourselves too much to bite in 2 hours. But we'll, I guess, we'll reflect on this with Yvonne.